how would you describe the broader trend of what you've seen, how people have been consuming the services and seeking support through the various platforms that iCall has before the before the COVID situation started in our life?
Right. So I think I'll get started, and Tanuja can definitely add to this. As you rightly said, that we started iCall in 2012, and iCall came as a response to the perceived gap, or a real gap actually, between communities' needs and what is available in terms of services. We realized that the community needs services which are affordable, accessible, and yet quality, and community services which people can have a control over. And that's where we thought of iCall. Technology offers us a great advantage in terms of affordability or accessibility and ensuring maximum reach. So if you see, over last 8 years, iCall has been growing every day and slowly introducing new mediums to its gamut of services. So now we offer services through telephone, which is where we started in 2012. Now we offer services through email also and through chat. Some of the top concerns that you will find, given the fact that it's a multilingual service, people call us from all parts of the country, but yet it is a professionally run service. We really receive calls over 20 plus themes, ranging from the traditional phase of psychosocial services, which will have mental health concerns. We also get concerns about emotional distress or academic concerns or relational conflicts, domestic violence, suicidality, self-harm. So you will see that entire range of distress across lifespan, because we advertise ourselves as a service which is psychosocial in nature, which means it is providing emotional first aid, but it's also providing long-term psychotherapeutic services and connecting people with the ground level referrals or resources that they need, be it legal aid, mental health professionals, or women's NGOs. So this is the entire gamut of concerns that people were calling us with. And I think our topmost demographic so far has been young people or younger adults, I would say. So this is pre-COVID picture. Of course, after COVID, some things have remained the same and some things have changed.
Yeah, I think just to add to what Aparna's already shared, I think the iCall has been around for some time now, and some of our learnings also indicate that the fact that, and I keep on saying this constantly, that the fact that services like ours work is also indicative of the factor that people don't have access to such spaces within their lives, within whatever pockets of distress that they are experiencing. So I think iCall, with the principle of confidentiality, anonymity, good quality professional mental health care, with that sort of a vision in mind, is able to cater to people, because there is a lack of such services across the country, which may be multilingual, which may not be diversity friendly, and many more other concerns. So I think iCall sorts of integrates that vision also when offering these services to people.
Good, thank you. And I think now immediately getting into this whole COVID age that we are in, I was just going through some data, and the US National Mental Health Hotline called SAMHSA, they have reported that during March, just 1 year, there's been a 9 times increase in the number of calls to the hotline year on year, which means March data of last year to March of this year. There's been a huge jump. So clearly there is a global trend about seeking support, emotional support, particularly during the COVID situation. How has iCall's experience been ever since we got into speaking about COVID and the lockdown regime?
I'll just begin by responding to it in terms of a few data points, and also Aparna can contribute to it. One is that, of course, we have also as a service seen that every year there is a huge jump in the kind of usage that we look at. There has also been a trend which we have seen in terms of the age group, the gender, the pockets, the also locations from which people are reaching out to us from. We initially would see emotional distress as one of the reasons for which people would reach us. Academic concerns is again another big issue for which people would reach us. But for almost a year or year and a half now, relationship issues has been one of the topmost reason for which people are accessing our services, which also shows a slight shift in terms of the trend. Now, coming to the kind of usage that we are seeing during COVID, and in terms of helpline services in general, one is that in order to adapt to this entire situation ourselves as an organization, and with the lockdown, we reduced the number of hours that we have been offering our services for. However, regardless of that, we've seen almost the same amount of numbers that we would cater to otherwise. That almost and for us, the COVID period is slightly different. Like in other countries, it may have started Jan, February, but for us, we've been seeing those trends from March onwards. Like we started seeing trends in terms of clients reaching in, asking about how scary is this? Are schools going to go off? Should we be working remotely? Our companies are not agreeing to work remotely. To now, after the lockdown being announced, then people worrying about how to cope up with the lockdown or how to adapt to it. So that means we have also seen the trend shift. However, despite reduced hours, we have received calls. We have offered almost 2,500 sessions across all of our three mediums, which is telephone, email, and chat within the month of March itself. I think that is one of the most significant trends that we have seen in the past few days.
I'll just add, Manoj, to what Tanuja has said, just to inform you that we felt that the current iCall numbers and counselors were so preoccupied with these calls, but we also found a lot of calls related to two issues. One is COVID-related concerns and the aftermath of COVID, that we decided to start a new line. So from 17th of April, we have started a new line just to address psychosocial impact of COVID. And I'm using the word very, very carefully because iCall has always maintained a stance that our mental health is not situated only within us, but it's within the interaction between me and my environment, including some of the structural determinants. So since 17th of April, we have started and we ran it for 6 days, but we have already received 200 calls on that helpline as well. And we have received calls from all over the country. And we haven't gone very aggressively in terms of publicity. This is just WhatsApp publicity, but we have been receiving calls from very marginalized sections of the society, including migrants, women survivors of violence, child sexual abuse survivors, or people with gender diverse or sexual diverse expressions also, to quote a few.
So clearly what we see here is that the manifestation of the mental health issues is not just through an emotional distress thing, but in many ways actually. And in the kind of wide range of issues that you mentioned, we've already begun to see in the dedicated line that you provided for COVID-related questions and concerns. People are calling us not just for their mental health issues, but many other issues like abuse and other areas, which is a very good, important trend to be picked up. So how have you seen the COVID situation and lockdown situation particularly? Because that's the life-changing experience that has come in, affecting and really creating such situations, such issues like relationship issues or abuse, for instance, or substance abuse also. Actually.
Right. So I would say that we are seeing two kinds of trends, right? One is, I think, or three, I would say. One is the old issues and the old callers are continuing to call us, right? Because those are long-standing issues. And to inform everybody, 50% of our callers are follow-up callers. Because as I said, that we are not just an emotional first aid helpline, but we offer regular contact services and follow-up services also. So I think those clients continue to call us on our old iCall numbers. But two more issues that we see, or trends we see, and within that there are several issues. Exacerbation of older issues. Yeah, many people are telling us, I thought I got over it, but looks like I haven't. or being locked up in the same household, there are new triggers every day, and there is no escape from those triggers, and therefore there is exacerbation of old patterns, distress, mental health issues. That's the second trend. And the third trend we are seeing is emergence of a new phase of mental health issues completely, right? For example, migrants who are calling us, or even if it's violence, it's a different kind of a manifestation where perpetrators may use newer tactics of scaring women with corona fear, or not allowing women to have access to soap or sanitizers. So there are newer phases of distress also that we see, but the old demons are also coming back. So I just want to say that it's a mixed bundle, and Tanuja can get into details of how the distress is manifesting over the helpline also.
Yeah, yeah. I think as Aparna very, very correctly said, that for us, distress or mental health is extremely psychosocial. So for us, even the fact that I'm a migrant worker who's stranded and cannot get home, or the fact that I don't have access to food or groceries is very much a mental health issue, and is very much a psychosocial issue. I think just to sort of add to what Aparna has been sharing, that one is that while a lot of times people are reaching out to us for practical requirements or practical needs, our counselors, because of our lens, are also trained in a way that they probe in terms of, okay, these are all the referrals, but how is it that you're taking care of your mental health? And in that, I think we are seeing a lot of emotional distress, heightened emotions that people are experiencing. There is also traumatization in form of, as Aparna was saying, that remembering previous triggers and being locked down in such a scenario. I think people are also talking about, it's almost like a forced living situation, whereby some students may have gone back home, you may be living with your partners. We have a lot of people who are living with their partners, girlfriends, boyfriends, and the lockdown got announced and are stuck with them. We have a lot of people whose family members are in other cities. They're unwell, they're old, but there's no way that they can access to them, they can reach out to them. I think just want to highlight that a huge aspect of grief, of sadness, loneliness, feeling numb, or feeling angry, frustrated, or even helpless for that matter, with regards to all of this arrangement. And it's even more challenging just because of the uncertainty of the environment. There is no clear clarity about, okay, what happens next, or you don't know what your next month will look like. You don't know whether jobs will be there, not there. So the lack of uncertainty limits people from gaining any sort of control, or even building hope in terms of that things will be better in a few days.
Great. I think uncertainty is something that has been probably one of the basic triggers of many issues there. And what we have also heard is anxiety is perhaps the most common way emotional distresses are manifested into. And a lot of issues around anxiety is coming up, though they may not necessarily know that it is anxiety. So how have you seen, and you mentioned about the demographic things. So are you seeing a lot more calls coming from the youth side, or any other certain profiles of people? You mentioned about migrants, certainly we'll touch upon that. But from an age group perspective, are you seeing more calls or more emails for support from any particular kind of people?
Yeah. In fact, just before this live, I think Aparna and I were discussing some of the trends that have come up, and very, very interesting. So iCall for many years now has had equal share of usage from female as well as male. It has been 51-52% male, and 49-48% female, and about 1 or 2% usage from people who identify as transgender. Interestingly, in the last month, our usage from female clients is reduced. It has gone down to 36%, which also highlights probably issues of access or being burdened with different tasks at home, children, caregiving, and so on, and not being able to reach. One of the second most important trend that I also want to highlight is that we saw that our usage again was higher from the age group of 11 to 20 and 21 to 30. But now, within this month, there is reduced usage from the age group of 11 to 20 and higher increased usage from people in the age group of from 21 to 50 years old. Something very, very interesting to see. Perhaps this is also because of issues of access, control, lack of privacy. Especially, I mean, if you're looking at adolescents, probably they would be calling this when parents are not home or they're away, when they come back from school, something like that. And or now probably you don't even have access to the telephone, or you don't even have access to the mobile. Or you just don't have privacy to talk to a counselor. I felt that these two sort of indicators in terms of the profile of callers seemed very interesting in terms of people who are reaching. But that also highlights the fact that these are the groups who probably may be in need of services, but are not able to access it. So we need to see how is it then we can connect to them, or how is it that we can reach to them.
I think that's
another thing I think related
sure.
to this change demographic also is that a lot of people who go to work are stranded at home, right? Yes. And I think really, I think one of the phenomenon that we are observing is people are telling us that I had these 1, 2, 3 coping mechanisms earlier. Yeah, they were good, they were bad, I don't know, but they worked, right? Temporarily, may not work long term. But many of those coping mechanisms were related to going out, yeah, going to a shop or going to a friend or taking a walk. Now, many of those coping mechanisms are not available to people, and they don't know how to adapt them to suit the new realities or develop new ones also. So that could be one of the reasons why this particular demographic, slightly older, is also reaching out to us, who would have been otherwise busy ignoring their mental health earlier, but now can't afford to do that anymore.
Yeah. I think I don't want to miss out this very important point that came out about the drop in the calls among female users in this period. And we still may not know exactly why, but one possible reason, and which should certainly be stated, I thought, is that, well, other members of the family may be at home during this lockdown, therefore they may not be able to call the helpline. So that access to a helpline and privacy, like Tanuja mentioned, is lost to them. And so they are a little disempowered in some way in that. And so we have to, I think we will have to think about how do we give that opportunity to them to be able to call and seek support. Yes, the other possible reason is also that from a COVID exclusive space is that we are hearing that the number of cases among men are far higher than the COVID instances are far higher than among women. So chances are that distress calls related to COVID and lockdown among men may be therefore also a little higher. That could be one reason also.
That also could be the reason, yeah.
Yeah, but then I think the 11 to 20 have been dropped. I think, of course, the drop is the drop in absolute terms, or is it in relation to the total number of calls?
It's in relation to, I think it's both. Okay. It's in relation to the total number of calls, but at the same time, I also try to do a comparison of our trends for the past 6 months versus what we have seen in the last month. Mm-hmm. And if we have seen usage around 15 to 20% within 11 to 20, in the last month, it has been 6%. So we feel that's a huge change within that group. So it's both, I would say.
It's a little surprising, isn't it? Because, I mean, I would have expected that age group to have a lot more concerns and anxiety around academic future, because there is a lot more uncertainty around that subject. And yet the numbers have dropped there. How would you read that?
Yeah. We were also discussing this, and I think we can just speculate at this juncture. One of the speculations is, I think, as Tanuja has already talked about, is related to privacy, whereby, you know, while we are hearing from parents that they are really irritated with their adolescents or young people's behavior of constantly being glued to social media or technology. So obviously there is a contact with technology, but maybe there is no privacy to call us also, and therefore, or maybe they are accessing some other ways of help seeking rather than calling on a helpline. Another thing we need to also remember that iCall also provides email-based and chat-based services whereby people can write to us. So maybe we need to check among these 3 services, has the usage from this age group increased in terms of email but decreased in terms of talking? That's also one possibility. I think we need to analyze our data to be able to say that. But I guess that maybe they are connecting to other people of their same age. And we are also realizing, Manoj, that every week also things change. It's not just the one month is not a blob. If I carefully look at our emails, initially we wouldn't see so many emails about, uncertainty, and people initially, thought that, okay, this is going to get over within 1 week. Then 1 week got extended to 3 weeks. Then you will find that the resources that people had to deal with these uncertainties are depleting every day. And therefore, the concerns that are emerging also, the uncertainty, anxiety is hitting people now with every passing week, as resources are also getting depleted. So I just wanted to highlight that also, that now we are getting calls, now we are getting emails saying that now I can't take it. I don't think it's in me. I think this is really words like this is getting to me. This is toxic. I think language is also very important to watch how people are languaging, articulating their distress.
Yeah, I think so. I remember when we started the first phase of lockdown, there was a finiteness to the whole thing. They said, okay, it's 21 days. So they all thought it was 21 days. So now it looks like people are saying that there is an open-endedness to that whole thing. And therefore, there is an increased anxiety there. Yes. I think it will be nice for us to move on to few communities, and one of the areas that you have also mentioned, Aparna and Tanuja, in fact, that people have a lot of questions around their work environment. A lot of people have been working from home also, but there are a lot of people who are also waiting out this period from a professional perspective for them to go back to their organizations. So what's the kind of trend and what's kind of broad observations that you have made on calls related to their work, professional life?
Tanuja, you want to get started?
Sure. So I think to begin with, as Aparna shared, that the trends with regards to even work have been similar in the sense that they have been changing on an every weekly basis. In the beginning, we saw a lot of conversations around whether it is safe to travel and my workplace not allowing work from home or working remotely. And then it moved to sort of issues in terms of blurred personal and professional boundaries, in terms of how do I schedule my day, not being able to get good enough sleep, work pressures probably sometimes. At the other end, we also have people who are used to being immersed in their work and now suddenly have very little work to focus on, which leaves them with, with sort of a lot of free time and not a lot to do with that time. Along with all of that, people are juggling their personal lives, people are juggling household work. And within that also, there are streams in terms of women callers and their themes in terms of struggling to manage both of them, dealing with relationship conflicts, dealing with difficulties in communicating to your partner about how to help, that I need your help in terms of household work. Then we have also people who are reaching out in terms of not being able to finish their work or focus on their work with regards to, because they have to take care of children, because children may be also having an expectation that you be around and you be involved. So those are also concerns that we are seeing. And at the same time, now as we are sort of nearing the 3rd May deadline, which was sort of given to us, the response that we're also getting from people is that, okay, now I feel like I somehow have lost the social skills, or I need to get in touch with my social skills, because I don't know now how to go back to that schedule where I work 9 to 5 and where I, focus on, do the clear demarcation of what is home and what is work. But I think one of the silver linings, I don't know whether it is silver lining really, is also the fact that because of this entire issue and the distress attached to it that people are experiencing, we also saw that organizations, companies were more open to focusing on their employees' mental health, which has been a long ignored, not ignored, but not been a priority really, But now we see a lot of organizations talking about employee mental health, talking about employee well-being, talking about how mental health is impacting people's productivity, performance. So I think that has also led to a lot of organizations taking cognizance and involving services or creating resources for their employees.
I think that's a very important point, Tanuja, that bring up that organizations clearly have started understanding the need to build emotional resilience among employees, also building communities which champion the cause of mental health in that community. And then now they started looking at organization and workforce as a community also, actually. But so from an experience of managing a helpline, what kind of organizations do you think organizations can start their own kind of captive helplines if they have answers to questions to begin with, that employees will have? Do you think they could do that? They could probably create some such, because there is a little bit of a trust that will be there to co-work among co-workers, and they would probably open up and seek that support. Do you think some kind of a first intervention opportunity or first reach out opportunity could be provided by organizations in such times of high anxiety and uncertainty?
I think already many corporate organizations have already come to iCall saying that they want to instantly start a helpline. And as Tanuja said that it's very heartening. But I just want to take this opportunity to say that, yes, technology is a great way to connect to your employees, because employees have hundreds of questions in their mind. Yeah. So there is their personal journey of struggling with motivations, not being able to delineate between personal, professional. There is diffusion. People are talking about living in a virtual bubble. Really, they don't know whether if they walk out, will they be able to walk? Will they be able to talk to real people, because the transactions are through screen? So I think they are struggling with these personal issues. People want to be productive but don't feel motivated. And then there is a guilt for everybody is telling me that I want to attend every webinar because there is a fear of missing webinars. So I can't tell you, I think there is a lot of turmoil. So people are struggling with personal issues. Organization needs to help them, but people also have issues about organization's treatment towards them also, about their job certainties, about their pay cards, about when is it going to happen. So many people are telling us that organizations are somewhere getting ready post-lockdown to start working, but people are not ready to go back. Some are very eager, some are, despite being eager, scared that can I travel in a city like Mumbai where we work. It is very difficult and scary for people to get into a train or a public transport. So they are dealing with several issues, but they are also dealing with questions about organization's future and organization's policy and their view of looking at their employees. So I feel that the helpline could be a possible way in which some mass messages which reassure people, which show concern towards people, and which tell people that the organization is thinking about you. That is very, very necessary, number one. Number two, if the helpline is just a tokenistic way of saying that here is another line, which, where you can go and vent out your issues and they will fix your minds, I feel that a more integrated view is required, whereby this helpline is a part of a larger caring culture that the organizations communicate to their employees. And another thing I want to also say that instead of having a top-down approach where the organization talks to some 4 experts and decides what is good, has to be a collaborative journey where they ask people. See, this is also a time, let me talk about the organizational point of view also. It's no party for them also. They are also very scared because they have to deliver the bad news of pay cuts and lay down, all of that. And the leaders are as scared as the employees because they have to deliver this news. So I feel maybe they also require some communication, messaging strategies, because the inevitable can't be avoided right now. But how do you still communicate care, and how do you create a culture of mental health, culture of care, culture of communication and connection? One last message I want to give. People need to be told that social distancing doesn't mean emotional distancing. You can stay away, but you can stay connected despite that. So I feel a more integrated approach would be better rather than starting one tokenistic helpline for sure.
I just want to
yes.
add a little bit over here. I think just in line with what Aparna has been saying, that and it really shows when and also people are more open to assimilating or accepting any sort of resources or services when they feel that the leaders really believe in it, or when the organization really wants it, and it's not merely doing a lip service to people by saying, here is one helpline. But I also just want to highlight that it's not just having access to mental health services, but one of the most important things that that people are struggling with is also the fact that working with teams, having somebody to communicate with, having that shared experience with people, and people are realizing how much more important that is for my own productivity and for my own morale and spirit. And if I think even to be able to reinstate some of those practices, or to be reinstate sort of how can I have the same experience while working remotely, will also go a long way in building resilience amongst people. So not merely just mental health services, but also creating spaces whereby I can connect to my team members, where I can feel that the communication is transparent, two-way, and where I can feel that the organization really believes in creating a more nurturing environment.
Yeah, I think these are very important points for organizations. Particularly, I've been spending some time in organization because there is a decision-making power that we have in that community, and it is a captive community, and so the transformations can happen much easier than a much broader, larger community. You know, one more aspect of organizations looking at emotional well-being of their employees, about not looking at employees as one cluster of people, and understanding that there are different levels of vulnerabilities among different profiles of employees, and then be able to provide services or intervention opportunities to whatever we could. That will be very key, I thought.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That's why I said that talking to people and deciding that is a better way to go about it, rather than imposing my understanding of what will work for you. I completely agree with you.
I want to move into the next important topic, which is about suicidality that we have seen, and different. I mean, we have been very closely looking at the number of reports, new media reports on deaths due to suicide have increased for various reasons, actually, and not just because of emotional distress alone. Have you seen the number of calls around suicidality increasing the last, ever since you started focusing on COVID-related issues?
Yeah, I think. Yeah, Varna, please go ahead.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, I think we have seen an increasing number of these calls. As I was saying earlier, that relationship issues has been one of the top reasons for which people reach out to us and access this service. But however, after relationship, we have concerns of emotional distress, we have concerns of violence against women, we have concerns of suicidal ideation, which may be the sixth or the seventh issue for which people usually reach us. But however, now in the past 1 month, it has gone up. So people are struggling with vulnerability, with concerns of suicidality, concerns of self-harm even, and are trying to seek services. I think one of the important facts that I also want to highlight is that now, apart from running our usual counseling service, ICOL also initiated this dedicated COVID line. And interesting to see that while we were expecting calls related to violence, suicide, there are a lot of these concerns which are coming in, which are practical concerns. Say, I don't have clothes, or I have a newborn baby, or I don't have a job, or I need some sort of support, I need food. And then suicidal ideations as a part of all of these concerns is something that we are seeing is coming up a lot in all of our cases.
And Manoj, I just want to add here, because I have been reading those reports also, particularly, for example, suicide helplines in North America have been reporting what you quoted also. But I just want to highlight a very important distinction between suicidal phenomenon in India and perhaps some of the developed countries also. If you look at the numbers and trends in India, suicide has in North America or some of the developed countries has been an expression of mental disorder or mental distress. Whereas in India, it is always linked with problems of living, unemployment or poverty, or domestic violence, particularly if you look at the women as a demographic, it is related to a lot of relational conflicts, violence, or what happens in their relational lives. And even I think I want to highlight that we can't just in a global way say that suicide is increasing. I think the social determinants or some of the uncertainties or what is happening in terms of massive transitions, people had planned their lives in a particular way, everything has got haywire, and loss of control and loss of really access to material resources. I think that has to be also remembered, so that we don't just fix mental health, but we fix all of those social determinants also. I also want to say that some of the social determinant related issues that existed in India, inequities or unequal distribution of resources, are emerging. So what was there already, we see it in a much more exacerbated form. So it's a good call for us to look at larger development issues and where we are going, because I think COVID has reminded definitely of all of us of that, definitely.
Thank you, Aparna, for bringing that up, because if I have seen one trend in the last 5 weeks of our COVID-related life, it is inequality really dominating the whole thing. I mean, it's really dominating in many ways. And I think that the reason I really brought up suicide was to also be able to understand any shifts that are happening in the social determinants and be able to really do something around it, and be it from a helpline or a hotline perspective to services we could offer to any other based on the level of influences each of us can have. So it's a very important topic, and we must be able to build some more data and understanding because this is not going to go, and we will certainly be talking about COVID or lockdown or a different social life for the coming months. And there's a huge need for us to focus on issues like suicidality. Moving on, I think.
Just one last line I want to, before you move on, that while there is a discourse and larger narrative of how COVID is an equalizer for all of us, I understand where it's coming from, but I also want to tell you that it's hitting unequal people in an unequal manner. And we have to be very sensitive, not just to the urban, uber rich kind of narratives, but we have to also look at the narratives of the marginalized, and the interventions have to address this entire range is what we want.
Agreed.
Like we were discussing, Tanuja, I think one of the silver lining, if you could say, or one of the good things that have happened is there is a spurt in number of helplines. And mental health members of the mental health fraternity have always been saying that there is a need for the country to have many more helplines. And we have been discussing Aparna that how we can create more iCalls also in different parts of the country. And it is so nice to see that there are a lot more social entrepreneurs and other influencers coming together to create helplines across the country to address the emotional distresses and psychosocial issues around COVID and lockdown. A lot of people are calling you also. So what kind of observation have you made about the vision they carry, the intent that they have? And then we will, of course, talk about the recommendations. So first, what observations have you made?
Anuja, you want to get started?
Sure. I think, I think it's honestly a mixed sort of emotion that I have when I look at this. One is that, of course, it's definitely good to see much more accessible mental health care. One of the things which is very, very commendable is that people have been, especially the mental health fraternity, has been very quick to understand, recognize, and respond to it by creating services, by creating platforms which are available free of cost, which are available accessible. Many professionals have been gracious enough to offer their services, to put out their numbers, and to offer free of cost prescription renewals, assist with people from different part of the country. Many associations have been running helplines. So everybody understands that there is a huge mental health requirement in this current period. And I think it's been very, very heartwarming to see everybody come together and offer and extend these services. Right? But I think my only thing is also that offering services over technology assisted mediums, considering that we have been almost doing this for almost a decade now, is not the same as just replacing the person in front of you with a telephone line or with a video interface or with a chat interface. There's a lot that goes in terms of designing ethical practice, structuring your service, and structuring it while keeping in mind what is the sustainability of the service. Like, and at the same time, this being thought out decisions, not accidental decisions, that the number of hours that the services are being offered, the duration for which they are being offered, the languages that are being offered, are people asked to pay, are people not asked to pay, is there any sort of priority being given to somebody who's more marginalized or somebody who's more vulnerable. I think those decisions have to be thought out. We are seeing that, of course, there are services which are running who have considered all of these factors, and unfortunately there are some services who may not have completely even analyzed what is the impact of these factors. I think for us on our part also, we felt a slight bit of concern with regards to so many practitioners offering online services, and I think little training that there is available in the country about how to offer practices online. I think Aparna will be the right person to talk about this also. But as a response to that, we also felt that it was our ethical responsibility to offer some capacity enhancement in this area. And as a response to that, we have been building a lot of webinars online on how is it that mental health professionals can offer counseling services over technology. But those have been the mixed sort of inputs that I have about so many services cropping up, and the kind of services being offered.
Yeah, and I would like to definitely, I think the mental health community, because I think when COVID started, the entire focus was initially on health. Then the discourse moved to development. Then we heard about these debates about, is it life versus livelihood, very famous term which was coined. So then people started talking about economic impact, but I found that mental health was missing a discourse. But the mental health professionals have been really spearheading this. I have a few concerns about some of these helplines. Well-intentioned, well-meaning, and wanting to serve, but as Tanuja said, very little preparation. Just one technology and one person doesn't make a technology-assisted counseling service, number one. Number two, the focus has been mental health, whereas the focus has to be psychosocial in today's time. We cannot afford to replicate biomedical, just diagnostic understandings of mental health. See, mental health has the capacity of flattening identities, that discourse. It doesn't see textures. But today is the time to see textures. As you rightly said, it doesn't hit everybody the same way. So I think having that psychosocial lens is extremely important. You cannot afford to say, oh, you can talk about emotional distress, but for food, we don't do anything. People understand help. People don't understand compartments. You have created those compartments. So you need to provide holistic services. Many helplines are saying, but we can talk only about emotional distress. For crisis, you go somewhere else. But I didn't know that when I called you. So you have to have capacities which are integrated in this fashion. And my worry is also, while there are well-intentioned people, I feel that it is also commercialization of technology. And I'm a bit concerned about that, because while I see well-meaning, intentional sort of, endeavors, I also see rapidly mushrooming trends of everything now will be solved around technology. That's not how our culture is. We are a very collective culture. We are a very visual culture. So it has to be techno and offline kind of a combination. A connection is something we can't afford to forget. So I'm a little bit concerned about this mushrooming of helplines that has happened in several parts of the country, for sure.
Yeah, I think, and just to just add one thing that I think there also has to be a clear vision for what happens. I mean, if the lockdown gets lifted this Sunday, do those helplines stop offering services? And then where do the clients go? I think there has to be some, I think as mental health professionals, it's our ethical responsibility, because now we have committed to those clients to cater to them. So I think that is one bit which is worrisome.
Yeah, so the two angles to it. One is, of course, that the fact the newer generation are comfortable with those platforms which are technology enabled. and would probably therefore say that I would want to seek out support online over phone or mail or chat. And so there will be a lot more increase, I would say, probably, if you are going to announce that this helpline and such resources are made available to them. But the question is, the preparedness there. And I think the whole aspect of ability or the resource mobilization that we do behind the call, behind the phone call, of who is sitting there and what kind of understanding of the entire space, like I pointed out, the rounded understanding of the space is so crucial there. And I know there are instances of helplines with volunteers coming in from any space, volunteers come in, and with very little training are managing the calls and managing the chat and email services. So I'm hoping that there will be there will be this course correction as people begin to demand better quality service, as they begin to call them up or seek support through email, and then they say that the quality requires improvement. And then we will see that, okay, then there will be a lot of questioning that happens between these helplines to say what needs to happen from a course correction perspective. So, but the good thing is that there has been a trigger, something has triggered this whole infrastructure creation, and hopefully there will be that whole quality question coming up soon.
Absolutely. And hopefully I feel that through this kind of an endeavor, I'm hoping that we are not only talking to people who are running helplines, but we are also talking to users who are accessing these helplines. Because I think mental health field in our culture, I mean, all over the globe, is predominantly expert driven. It's not client driven. So I hope that client literacy also increases just as their demand increases, so that they know what a good service is and what they can expect from that. So I'm hoping whoever is listening to us will also understand that just because somebody is providing help doesn't mean that you have to be grateful. You can demand quality also, and that's your right.
One of the things we have also seen among people in the mental health space is that however much we see an increase in the number of people who are reaching out to us, we know that it is still a tip of the iceberg, because the need to reach out, the number of people who need services of this kind, of any kind, so that they get the right professional support and intervention is huge. So while we may have probably seen some increase in the number of helplines coming up and number of people who are reaching out to these helplines, but then the number of people who are not able to reach out for different reasons is huge, continues to remain huge in the country. And we should not forget that. I mean, we may probably rejoice with the fact that numbers have increased, so we are able to serve more people, but we may therefore have to continue to be innovative in thinking about how do we address who may still not be able to use any of the technology-enabled services. And I'm sure as part of this, there will be some initiatives and some work that you would be thinking of.
Yeah, I agree with you that I said sometime back that we are not a culture. I mean, although young people are very pro technology, I know that there are many who may not have access. I mean, teledensity surveys in India show that 1 in 3 people have access to telephone. Doesn't mean that they have an uninterrupted or unsupervised access to phone. So I think we need to always remember offline solutions are as much required as online or technology-based solutions. Secondly, I think being situated in TISS, we are also very clear that curative level measures are important, but preventive level measures or promotive level measures are equally important. Because as I said, that COVID has unfortunately actually erupted. It has led to an eruption of some pre-existing structural inequalities or certain kinds of oppressions or discriminations or triggers at individual, interpersonal or structural or community levels. You know, today, for example, there is hatred against certain castes or certain religions, which is also one of the dimensions of this COVID. So at this TISS has actually put together a task force, which is mental health is one part of that, but there are many other members of the task force which are addressing several other dimensions of this entire pandemic at health or structural or economic or community level or looking at dimensions of poverty, unemployment also. And that's why I said that we require a curative response, but definitely we require a more holistic response which looks at the root causes of some of these issues and not just try to fix whatever is emerging right now.
One area which we did not cover is geographical differences. While of course iCall is a national level helpline and people reach out from different corners of the country, but there are different geographical uniqueness that we have, and the psychosocial issues and the mental health aspects and manifestation are very unique to those regions also. And today, if you look at different reasons, migrants, for instance, when these migrants go back to their homes, and they are in hundreds of thousands of people, each of the geographies will see different kinds of issues coming up there. How do you think these helplines can probably look at from a geography-specific services also? And do you see the need for that at all?
Yeah, I think most definitely there's a need for these services to be available, especially to those who have reduced access. And I mean, at this point of time, we are even talking about people who can access their phone or who can make a choice to call a counselor as opposed to calling their family member, in the sense that the fact that I may not have a mobile, the fact that I may not have network, the fact that I just don't know how to use a mobile, and for that I have to rely on my children, my parents, or somebody else. So there are those people also who don't have access or don't have comfort or ease with technology, and in different groups across the country, related to caste, gender, sexual orientation, religion, the profession that we are looking at. So when responding to concerns of these groups, of course, there is a requirement for services to cater to them. I think one of the very important insights from iCall's work has also been that we have always been a multilingual service, and we have mindfully kept in mind that we expand in terms of languages, which leads to higher usage from regional languages. And to share that, even with the COVID line as well as the iCall line that we are running, with both the lines, there has been specific requirements, increased requirement for counseling in vernacular languages, because people who cannot speak English, Hindi, want to connect to a counselor or want to speak with somebody with regards to their concern. So while offering multilingual services is one of the ways to address it, but that being said, I think linking to what Aparna was sharing earlier, that you need some offline services to be there, or formats of these services to be there. Also for people who may not want to connect with you on a phone, or may not want to, or may not know how to connect with you over a phone, or so on.
So Manoj, also to add to Tanuja, we have been receiving calls for certain especially from certain geographies where the lockdown has been very, very heavy. And therefore people don't have access to food, ration. These could be crowded slums of Mumbai, or these could be interiors of Maharashtra, or from day one, when we started this COVID line, we have received calls from Kashmir, Jaisalmer. So it could be because the lockdown is very heavy, people don't have access to services, or it is that people live in remote areas that otherwise also there are no services. We've had interesting call. I remember emails from places like Delhi or Kashmir who have said that earlier these two cities were in limelight for some other reasons and they were already in lockdown, and now this seems to be like an endless journey for them. So I'm just saying that geographies do have a lot to do with mental health and what their requirements are, to continue with your question. And we have to devise solutions which are very catered or tailor-made for their concerns. Yeah.
Thank you. I would like to take questions from the participants. So I would urge the participants to key in their questions in the chat window. There's one question that has come in, and he's a social worker working with the urban slum dwelling population. What kind of coping mechanisms can we suggest if we are to provide psychosocial support to our beneficiaries, given we are also so uncertain about the details of the future, details and the future? Would you want to answer that?
It's a difficult question. So first of all, whoever is the social worker who has asked this question, I hope that person is okay, because I know that being a frontline worker itself takes a huge toll on your health and mental health. So I hope you are safe and you are doing okay. So we are realizing that particularly in Mumbai, for example, where the helpline functions from, I can use some of those examples also. And I'm realizing that some of these things that we are telling people to maintain social distancing, wash your hands, and go, take some hobbies. You are living in a room where 15 people are cramped in one room. I think whenever you are suggesting coping mechanisms also, you have to be extremely mindful about what resources are available to people. Do they have access to water? Do they have access to soap? Can they go out? Can they follow social distancing? So we have been coming up with very small things. First thing we do a check on helpline as to what are the resources that are available to you. And then we sort of, suggest coping mechanisms. We are also realizing that while it seems like a very crowded area, people are still feeling isolated. So they are surrounded by thousands, but they are still feeling very, very lonely. So I think you need to be well versed with that also. And people definitely require practical help also. That's another way which boosts their coping, because then they feel they are in charge of their life, there is control, and then perhaps they can think differently about future also. So I think it's a mixed bag, but adaptation is a must. You can't talk about very upper class solutions about listen to music, take a bath, and that doesn't work here. You have to understand what is the contextual reality for sure.
I just want to give one message. I think one is that while many of us may not be doing mental health work, or maybe doing relief work, maybe doing supporting the community in different capacities, but I think just the aspect of bringing in mental health, bringing in issues of self-care, and leaving that message and encouraging people to engage in self-care in whatever capacity possible. And of course, as Aparna said, that you can't be telling somebody to take a massage, take a bubble bath or anything like that, or go to a spa. Methods which are adapted, that it's okay to just find one space within your day, just make a cup of chai for yourself, sit in a corner, do not talk to anybody. So things such as these. But I think bringing in self-care in all of the work that we do, bringing in emotionally checking in on people on how they are doing, encouraging them to be in touch with their loved ones, their friends, be connected, I think can go a long way again in building resilience within the communities that we work in.
Yes. So talking about iCall, I mean, it is certainly a major force in the country in reaching critical first level intervention to underserved and even unserved communities. What are your plans for iCalls in addressing the increase in demand and the different nature of problems that are opening up? Like you mentioned, Aparna, every week is a different week. What are the plans that you have for iCall?
I wish I had a certain answer for that, but I think iCall is also clouded and confronted with the same uncertainty that many people are. Anyway, jokes apart, but we are currently working in 4 ways to address these issues, and hopefully I think we will continue to do those and think of more strategies. One is we are into direct service provision, and having this separate helpline is a step towards that, because I think we felt the need to do this in a concentrated manner. That is one. So responding to immediate needs. The second way in which we are working right now is capacity enhancement, because we are going to require thousands of hands to first of all work at an interventive level or even at a preventive level. And people really don't know how to navigate through these difficulties. So we are working in terms of capacity enhancement of different cadres of helping professionals. Third thing is we are providing consultancy to government, international organizations as to how to strategize, how to create protocols, guidelines, so that the work is not just accidental, but it's much more streamlined, thought out, strategized. And the fourth area in which we are working is awareness creation, because as I said, that curative work is required, but the preventive level work, or be it promotive level work, is also required. So we are creating a lot of content in not only English but regional languages, so that not only we create awareness around corona, how to keep yourself safe, but how to keep yourself safe or less damaged of the effects of lockdown or everything that follows. And the last thing I think we are currently working on, what after lockdown, because we have talked enough of lockdown and everybody is thinking lockdown lifted and life is going to change. But everybody at the bottom of their heart knows that that's not the reality. So even preparing people for post-lockdown life is also some of the immediate directions that I can think about. I think having a long-term strategy is something we are so flooded with the here and now that these are the immediate 4 or 5 directions in which we thought we should start working.